Welcome. I'm Ed Friedman. I chair Friends of Merrymeeting Bay. Thank you very much for being here. Um, Appreciate you coming tonight. It's a nice night out. This is the last of our winter series for this year. This is our 28th year doing this. And we have about, I think going back to 2010, recorded, presentations recorded on our website. I'll show you where those are in a minute. We are recording now, so if you don't want to be recorded, it's a good time to leave. And I want to thank Martin McDonough, our web coordinator and tech coordinator here, who will, within a few days, probably have this recording up on the website. We are a unique group. I'm not sure who's on the call, so from talking to people that know this already or not, but we're a unique group in that we take a holistic look at the environment. Uh, these four major categories, chiefly. We try and let our research, some of which is pretty cutting edge, inform our advocacy, which has been also called sharp-elbowed before, depending on the issue. We are a land trust. We protected a lot of land around the bay, and we have an active education program. And we'll go through a few slides showing some examples here. Multi-year circulation study of the bay. It's really cool. It's on the website, animated. You can see how the water moves around. We are a veritable soup bowl where six rivers meet and have a hard time getting out because of the chops, the narrows at the entrance exit to the middle part of the bay. When the paper mills, pulp mills changed their bleaching process from using liquid chlorine and heat, which created dioxin, they went to chlorine dioxide, a gas. The question was, are they still producing dioxin or not? We did a multi-year caged mussel program to determine that they, in fact, were no longer discharging dioxin. We're doing active bald eagle surveys, still longer than anyone in the state. Merrymeeting Bay is the sort of second best hotspot in the state for bald eagle recovery. Would be Flu Sunday. We'll be flying next week down at the Casco Bay. And as a segue, some of the more recent research stuff we've been doing has been around PFAS chemicals, forever or everywhere chemicals. And so we're working with Biodiversity Research Institute and really looking at eaglets and eagle uptake of PFAS chemicals, particularly around the area of the Brunswick Naval Air Station spill. And just this afternoon, I got in some most recent results from PFAS sampling we did with the Brunswick Sewer District, April 23rd. And one of they've got a bunch of pump stations on the air base, former air station. And one thing we did was went down into a pit, sampled out of a pit near Hangar 4, which is where the spill was in. And I'd say we got an all-time high. We got, well, PFAS levels of over 409,000 parts per trillion from that one hole. And the the levels for drinking water is it's like 0.4 parts per trillion. Surface water, it's about 250. So there's work to be done out there. So a lot of our advocacy work revolves around fish passage, migratory fish passage. And you can see some couple of gruesome examples here of turbine mortality. If the fish get up around the dam via fishway or trap and truck, they got to get back down. And in the case of hydro dams, they got to go through the turbines, or they often go through the turbines if they don't have a safe bypass way. So we work with Fish and Wildlife Service, National Marine Fisheries Service, or NOAA Fisheries, and state agencies, and trying to work on this issue. No excuse for it anymore. And just again, opportune slide here and date. Just yesterday, we had 150 fourth graders out at the Chop Point School, which is again right down by the Chops. And you couldn't imagine a more beautiful spot and a more beautiful day yesterday. And they're running around, doing hands-on workshops, getting dirty, having just all kinds of fun for the most part. And we've had kids say, I don't want to stop. I want to be an archaeologist. The kids in the lower left in this picture here are just working on watershed modeling, where they're modeling the Maine Bay area with like a vermiculite mud and to make it rain. The beach seining here, they're seeing what they catch and talking about that. They were doing environmental art stuff. And I talked to one of the teachers, and they do a few field trips during the year, but our bay days are the only ones where they get outside and get to run around and do fun stuff, as opposed to like going to the Maine Maritime Museum. We've protected over 1,500 acres of land now, focuses on valuable wildlife habitat and wetlands, as opposed to trails and human recreation. There's a lot of that already. And if you like the program or want to see some more of our older programs, this is the homepage of our website, f1b.org or friendsofmariminiBay.org. Scroll down the right side, you'll see research, advocacy, education, conservation. Under education, speaker series video list here. And yeah, that should get you to where you need to be. End of our series. I think in one of those links, you'll see past, you'll see all the past series as well. And you'll also see series going back 28 years that we don't have recordings of, but you at least get to see the subjects that we had covered. And we are doing this via Zoom now for, since COVID started, and seems to work pretty well because we can bring in people from all over, and many of our members who aren't necessarily here at a given time can watch from someplace else. So with that, I will introduce our speaker tonight, Chris Meany, and thank you, Chris, for being here. Chris is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Gulf of Maine Coastal Program Project Coordinator, and his main offices, or their main offices, down in Falmouth, Maine. The Gulf of Maine Coastal Program works to protect and restore fish, wildlife, and their habitats within the Gulf of Maine ecosystem. You can see a, slide right here of the Gulf of Maine and the way the currents are moving around. Slide of Marimini Bay in the middle, Damaris Cove, Popham Beach, and one of our constituents out here next to Chris. So Chris works to foster and advance new and existing voluntary conservation efforts with a large group of partners, including state, federal, municipal agencies, NGOs like us, non-government agency organizations, academia, and private landowners. Prior to joining Fish and Wildlife Service, Chris served as the Deputy Division Chief of the Habitat Protection Division in the National Oceans and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, Fisheries Office, formerly National Marine Fisheries Service, or NIMFS. So long names, so short acronyms, NOAA and NIMFS. And that was down in Silver Spring, Maryland. He served as an advisor to the NOAA administrator in the NOAA Program Coordination Office and NOAA Office of Policy in Washington, D.C. He's a National Conservation Leadership Institute Fellow and peer coach and Knaus Sea Grant Fellow alumnus. Chris has a master's in environmental management from the Yale School of Environment and a Bachelor of Science in environmental conservation from UNH down in Durham, New Hampshire. And with that, Chris, I'm going to turn the screen over to you, or you can take over the screen from me, and we'll see how it works. And thank you again for being here.
Thanks, Ed, and thanks, folks, for joining. Really appreciate having the opportunity to meet with you all this evening and kind of close out your speaker series. And a couple of my staff are out on Bay Day with Friends of Marimini Bay yesterday and had a great time. So really glad to be here. I'm just gonna toggle my screen here and get things going. Martin and Ed, you can just confirm that you see my slide there, my title slide, and then we'll get going.
I am confirming. We have you loud and clear, and we see your big slide. So I'm going to mute myself now, and you have at it. Oh, sorry about that. One thing I didn't mention, if you have questions, please put them in the chat, and I'll probably moderate them at the end. Chris may, if he feels good, he may look at them, but put them there, and we'll stop when Chris is done and entertain any questions you have. So thank you.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you for that. Um, so let's jump right into it. I'm going to talk about the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service a little bit, the Gulf of Maine Coastal Program that I oversee, and talk about what we've done here in the Gulf of Maine in the past and currently, and then what lies ahead. So on we go. All right, great. So I kind of wanted to just kick this off because what's I believe is super important is why conservation matters. So typically when I ask this question in a room, I might ask folks to raise some hands. You don't have to, but I'm going to make the assumption that we've got maybe some birders out there or paddlers or folks that just like to take a walk outside or maybe some coastal business owners. So there are multiple reasons why conservation work is important here in the Gulf of Maine, which are really linked to the different sets of values that you hold and who you are. So we know that conservation sustains diverse and abundant populations of fish, wildlife, and plants. Um, Conservation also helps improve our water, provide storm resilience, and also carbon storage. Importantly, our habitats and conservation efforts provide and create jobs and increase recreational opportunities like fishing and hunting and bird watching. Many of these habitats are essential for our recreational and commercial fisheries. Not only that, conservation provides an opportunity to build and engage with our communities and contribute to our well-being. So, in addition to preserving a way of life, our cultures and traditions, there really is tremendous value, both economically and socially, to the conservation work that collectively we're all doing. So before I talk about the Gulf of Maine Coastal Program, I wanted just to highlight that there are multiple Fish and Wildlife Service programs here in Maine. Fish and Wildlife Service is a federal agency. We're part of the Department of Interior. So here in Maine, we have 5 wildlife refuges. We have the Maine Coastal Islands Complex, Aroostook, Moosehorn, Rachel Carson, and Great Thicket, and Sunk Hayes Meadows National Wildlife Refuges that you can visit. And their mission is to manage a network of lands to conserve fish, wildlife, plants, and their habitats. We also have a fish and aquatic conservation program. They operate 2 federal fish hatcheries. Those are conservation hatcheries for the endangered Atlantic salmon. Fish and aquatic conservation biologists in Maine also assist with project funding for fish habitat projects as well. We have staff who work in ecological services. That's more of our regulatory arm that work on endangered species consultations and listings, biological opinions, Federal Power Act, hydropower dam relicensings, and that type of more regulatory work. We also have an enforcement presence here in Maine, as well as a coastal and partners for Fish and Wildlife program. The coastal partners is what I'm going to focus on for the rest of my talk here. But the partners program is similar. It's not focused on the coast, but it does work with private landowners to advance conservation. It really is a team effort. Whoops, I jumped ahead a couple. There we go. Okay. So the Gulf of Maine Coastal Program is one of 22 coastal program offices nationwide. We are a voluntary, non-regulatory habitat conservation program that provides technical and financial assistance support for projects that benefit coastal species and coastal communities. So later in my talk, I'll give you some examples of the type of work that we've done and are doing. But we work with a diversity of partners, tribes, other federal agencies, state agencies, local communities, universities, land trust, and other service programs. So our project work, one thing that makes us special in my mind is that we can work on both public and private land. lands and waters that helps us maximize our conservation impact. And we truly are a flexible and adaptable program. We work to support partner needs and often serve as a catalyst for larger projects. We might be on the ground first working with a community or partner group and then help them leverage additional larger funds. So last slide on the sort of the overarching national piece. The coastal program was initiated in 1985 with the Chesapeake Bay program. And then 92, it expanded nationally as the United States Fish and Wildlife Service Bay and Estuary Program, with new offices in 8 priority coastal areas, the Gulf of Maine Coastal Program being one of them. In 98, it was renamed the Coastal Program, thinking more along like a watershed approach to management. And in 99, it expanded to 22 coastal areas. And excitingly, I would say last year, our program was authorized via the Coastal Habitat Conservation Act. So we have authorizing language, federal authorizing language for our program, which is important. It also sort of paves the opportunity for appropriators to appropriate federal funds up to, and it's up to them if they want to go over it, but 16 million is what is nationally written into that piece of legislation. So that was an exciting moment in time, something our folks in our headquarters office in Arlington, Virginia, were working diligently on. Let's see here. I might be sharing some things that you all know, but the Gulf of Maine Coastal Program, the Gulf of Maine Coastal Watershed is really a very special place. So we're zooming down from the national level here to the Gulf of Maine. It encompasses almost 70,000 square miles and includes Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Quebec. You can see on my slides, we have diverse habitats from headwaters to estuaries and open ocean. The Mary Meeting Bay being one of those special places. We have more coastline, longer coastline than California. 25% of Maine's land is wetlands. Over 500 islands for nesting seabirds. 5,000 plus rivers and streams, and 17 million acres of forests. So the habitat diversity and complexity here in the Gulf of Maine is greater than it is in our southerly temperate coastal regions to the south. So I have a list and some images there of some of the species that we've worked on over the years and you'll hear more about, but we have many rare and unique species, 11 listed as federally threatened or endangered. So species like the roseate and least terns, piping plover, Atlantic salmon, New England cottontail, a few turtles, diadromous fish like rainbow smelt and river herring, and a multitude of rare plants. There truly are too many to list on one slide, and even in a presentation like this. Whoops. Wow, this mouse is touchy. Sorry about that. All right. So a look at the Gulf of Maine coastal programs past. As I mentioned, we were initially called the Gulf of Maine Estuary Project. So recognizing the valuable resources in the Gulf of Maine watershed, the Fish and Wildlife Service created this program. It was actually in 1991, but I think it was kind of formalized in 92. The watershed and ocean environment in the Gulf of Maine was viewed as healthy, but in need of protecting from growing threats like development, habitat fragmentation, and concerns over point and non-point solution. So it seems like an exciting time in the late 80s and early 90s for coastal conservation in the Northeast. In 1987, the Clean Water Act established the National Estuary Program administered by the Environmental Protection Agency. And that created two national estuary partnerships, the Mass Bay Estuary Partnership and the Casco Bay Estuary Partnership, which became very close partners with the Fish and Wildlife Service Estuary Project. Around that same time in 1990, the Gulf of Maine Council on the Marine Environment was organized, and that's an international body that was organized to protect environmental quality and discuss and address share transboundary issues. So at its heyday, those groups were coming together to really make a difference within the Gulf of Maine. And it was the view of the Fish and Wildlife Service that the Gulf of Maine Estuary Project would bring Fish and Wildlife Service issues to these bodies and help communities as well. So at its outset, the Gulf of Maine Estuary Program, the objectives included designing and implementing public education and outreach programs, developing and implementing management strategies to counter threats, and to serve as an information clearinghouse to partners within the Gulf of Maine, and also identify field needs for further research and management. On the slide, I was able to dig up some old newsletters. One old newsletter from 1992 on the left, which talks about the program getting started. And on the right is a newsletter that talked about an early species inventory that was conducted with partners. So it was nice to find that in advance of this talk. So there have been multiple types of projects and partnerships over the years for the Gulf of Maine coastal program here at the Fish and Wildlife Service. From the beginning, this office worked on geographic information systems, GIS, spatial analysis, and habitat models. And this was really the program's bread and butter for quite some time, because that GIS capacity within the community was pretty limited with computing and whatnot. So the Gulf of Maine Coastal Program had that technology and had the staff to fill an important niche. So staff were providing species and habitat information to partners like the state and land trusts to assist with management decisions. So for example, the program worked with Rachel Carson National Wildlife Refuge, providing species and habitat information so they could acquire properties through federal funding like coastal wetland grants and other federal sources, and also supporting land trusts at that time to do land conservation work. And then, the GIS work and spatial analysis has always been a backbone here. And over time, staff worked with state partners and others on the foundations of what was to become the Beginning with Habitat program, which truly is a special program here in Maine that provides natural resource information, habitat information, high value species information to towns so they can plan accordingly when they're doing comprehensive plans and things like that. So that really has been a pivotal piece of the work. Seabird conservation has been a big part of our work through the years. Here's an older picture of a razorbill seabird. Staff here have partnered with the Maine Coastal Islands National Wildlife Refuge, Inland Fish and Wildlife, National Audubon, Project Puffin, universities, and others to do habitat mapping and species surveys, and also logistical support, shuttling folks out to islands so they could get the work done, as well as data processing. Watershed conservation and restoration of diadromous fish species. So again, things like Atlantic salmon, river herring, rainbow smelt has always been a priority for the program, just given our valuable fishery and river and stream resources, as well as impacts from historical practices like logging and dams. So from the early days, staff have been out surveying rivers and streams to help with restoration efforts. And that really kicked into high gear when the Atlantic salmon was listed under the Endangered Species Act as endangered in the year 2000. So this office mapped and modeled Atlantic salmon habitat that has been informing Atlantic salmon recovery ever since. Something pretty unique and special was that beginning in 2006 with funding from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, Gulf of Maine Coastal Program with the Maine Forest Service and many other partners set out to coordinate river and stream barrier inventory. So we've actually, with partners, inventoried all the road, dam, and natural barriers to fish passage in the state, which is now viewable online. It's called the Mainstream Habitat Viewer. And this has been just such a difference maker in conservation, knowing where those barriers are and assisting federal agencies, the state, Department of Transportation, and others in their efforts to improve safety, road conditions, as well as aquatic organism passage. So that was super exciting. I have a picture here of the New England cottontail, New England's only native rabbit. And in 2006, that became a candidate for listing under the Endangered Species Act. But due to a strong partnership of state and federal biologists working with private landowners, tribes, and foresters, we were able to conduct habitat work here in Maine and in the Northeast to prevent that listing. And in 2015, it was determined that it did not need to be listed under the Endangered Species Act. So little proof there that working together, we can prevent listings of species under the Endangered Species Act, and that management continues today. So moving right along, while we've done tremendous amount of work here over the years, there continue to be a multitude of threats within the Gulf of Maine ecosystem, some that are old and some that are new that we're continuing to learn about. So we're still seeing habitat loss and fragmentation via development, dams, and road crossings. Impacts from rising seas and increased intense storms, flooding, and warming waters are proving to be challenging for coastal communities and species and their habitats. We're also learning more about historic practices like historic farming on marshes. That's what that middle picture is there. You can see some of the ditching that has happened over the years. We've learned that, farmers were very good at what they were doing and utilized that salt hay for their cattle and for selling at market. But that has had a negative impact on our marshes that with sea level rise happening, the ditching and some of the embankments have led to the hydrology kind of being off and marshes subsiding, which isn't great for flood protection and species like the salt marsh sparrow that really need certain types of habitat within the marshes. So invasive species continues to be an issue, things like Phragmites and pepperweed in the south, and then of course always concerns with point and non-point source pollution. So today, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Gulf of Maine Coastal Program goals are to increase the amount of habitat conserved within the Gulf of Maine ecosystem, broaden and strengthen partnerships, and improve sharing and information sharing and communication. So up on the screen, you'll see our current priorities. Some are similar to those of the program's beginning, but we have evolved over time. We continue to work proactively with partners on a variety of projects. And I think that one thing that has changed over the years to the present is that we are really focused on the ground delivery of conservation projects. a lot of that data inventory and data collection has happened or is happening by other entities. So now we're able to focus our capacity and resources to working with communities. I've shared here our focus area, which was developed 5 years ago. It's strategically large, as it allows us flexibility to work with and in different areas. That part that stretches almost up to the Canadian border there is the Mary Meeting Bay Salmon Habitat Recovery Unit. So we've been very active within that entire watershed, not just down on the coast, to help recover Atlantic salmon. So at the time we were doing this focus area, there was a lot of talk of federal funding coming for infrastructure and or climate related work. So we thought it strategic to have a large focus area. So while on the map, that focus area looks large, just giving capacity, we focus primarily on Mid-Coast Maine, the Casco Bay watershed, the Upper Sandy River, which I was just highlighting, and then coastal New Hampshire. We do work in down east, but we have to be strategic about our time up there. Speaking of capacity, we are a small but mighty crew. There's a team of 4 federal employees. We also have 2 contractors or collaborators that work with us and 2 volunteers. This fluctuates and has fluctuated over the years. But you can see on the slide there the hashtags denoting their interests and focus areas within the office here. Some of our current priority initiatives, the Mary Meeting Bay watershed restoration and species recovery, so both within the estuary and up in the watershed. We work with partners to better understand stream temperature changes, as that's important to helping our cold water fisheries. I've mentioned coastal diatremous fish. We've been providing support to the Royal River dam removal effort there, as well as some smelt monitoring in and around Casco Bay. Land protection has always been a priority and an effort here with the Gulf of Maine Coastal Program, working with the Maine Wetlands Coalition, as well as ecosystem and marsh work. We're actively engaged with partners in a handful of marshes around the state: Addison and down east, Spurwink, Cousins, Scarborough, down this way in Casco Bay, Phippsburg, and a large project in the Seabrook Hampton estuary. So when we're not out in the field doing technical work, we're also working with partners to strategize. So helping with beginning with habitat and the state wildlife action plan that is being updated this year. And that's an action plan that all states are required to have, denoting, wildlife management plans. So we also had an exciting project that's wrapping up in the Kennebago headwaters in Western Maine, focused on brook trout, through some funding secured by Senator Collins. We were able to work with the Rangeley Lakes Heritage Trust to work on aquatic connectivity. So some pictures of what our work looks like. Conservation involves careful planning and setting goals and meeting with landowners and plant and animal and vegetation surveys and utilizing GIS computer systems, engineering and design. So there really is quite a bit that goes into our work. In the left-hand corner, there's a salt marsh sparrow that is being noted as part of a bird survey. That's the picture below it as well, biologists in the field collecting data. You heard me talk about ditches and embankments in marshes. The blue and yellow lines denote restoration designs to help improve marsh hydrology, so we can make it so water doesn't pool on marshes and it can drain off. So in the bottom right, there's a picture of filling marshes with some marsh hay so that sediment accretes and marshes hopefully do not subside. Culvert replacement on the left, you could see the sort of during where we help remove a road culvert and put in a nice bridge that is friendly to both mammals and other aquatic species like turtles and fish that go through. It also helps landowners, in that instance, the timber company, with safety so their roads aren't blowing out. They have a nice bridge with plenty of room for water to flow. There's some smelt monitoring there in Freeport that Julia and Bonnie have been helping the state with. Pictures of dam removals, getting out in the field, coming up with designs, collecting data, so we can give it to the engineers and they do the engineering and then help with removal. Bottom right is kind of one of my favorites, at least as of late. This past winter, I was able to help with salmon egg planting. So utilizing hatchery raised salmon eggs and putting them into a river utilizing a pump. And that sort of mimics how a salmon spawns. They use their tail to clear a gravelly area, they lay their eggs, and then they cover it back up. But because there's not that many of them, the DMR, the state biologist, came up with this neat way of kind of blowing air and water to clear the rocks. Then we put in the eggs and then we cover them back up. So that was my New Year's resolution, to get out with those biologists, and it really was a good time. Over the years, we continue to work with pollinator work. Unfortunately, pollinators like bees and bats and butterflies aren't doing well. So the more that we can get out and plant native plants and work with school kids, the better, to help that learning and draw a connection. We support marine debris removal, and we're hosting workshops and working to build capacity within communities, within, say, the engineering community as well. So it can't just be us doing this work. It needs to be a whole bunch of folks, and the more folks learn and have experiences, the better. Bottom right is looking at eelgrass seed collection. Eelgrass in the Northeast, some places isn't doing well, and surprisingly, we don't know too much about its life cycle. So we've joined up with partners here in the Casco Bay to better understand eelgrass. I thought Ed might like this one, and you all. This is we do GIS work and we do provide maps. So we provided this one for the Mary Meeting Bay Salmon Habitat Recovery Work Group. They had a goal of, in the past 5 years, increasing the amount of conserved land by 15%. And our early analysis has indicated that we're just shy of the 15. I think it's around 9 to 10%. But kudos to everyone who's working so hard on that topic, because 10% increase in conserved lands over 5 years is pretty great. So I want to just share with folks some of our key accomplishments in the past year. I talked about that project in Western Maine on the Kennebago River. We removed 5 barriers, improving 8 miles of stream. Last year, working with partners, providing information and data, over 8,000 acres were protected, and that was about $5.3 million awarded through a total of 5 federal grants. Maine does really, really well, and it really is because of the coalition and partnership in the way in which folks work together to conserve land. We helped partners in New Hampshire secure $2 million for salt marsh restoration, which was no easy feat, but that's going to result in hundreds of acres being restored down there. And we now have a Maine tidal marsh restoration work, so a network of practitioners who are sharing information, leveraging resources. That was something that we haven't had here in Maine before, but now we do. And we're expecting a lot of great progress and things that come from that network. This slide just shows over the past 10 years what we were able to accomplish, which is quite impressive. Again, small staff, small and mighty, but we work with other federal agencies and partners. So hopefully you're picking up on a theme here of partnership, and that's what really makes things work. Working to close it out here. Our future. Let's see. We have a new administration and new priorities. So we're working to learn what those are and adapting and bringing them into the communities. So we know that ensuring natural resources are sound and sustainable and available is important to this administration. So that aligns really well with our program. We know that collaboration and coordination is important, working with states. And again, that is what this program was designed to do. So I think there's a lot of opportunity. The federal workforce right now is undergoing a lot of change, and we won't know what that looks like for some time. However, with change brings new opportunities. So we'll wait and see what that looks like. We're also co-locating with the Rachel Carson National Wildlife Refuge later this year. So again, that'll bring new opportunities, working closely with the refuge biologists, but it also may impact what we work on and where and who we work with. So time will tell on a lot of these things, but change is constant, and there's plenty of work to do within the Gulf of Maine. I have a picture of Bonnie there. Technology and innovation, I think, is ahead of us. There's a lot happening. We recently were able to obtain a drone that can do quite a bit for us. It can fly using different types of sensors, so we can be more efficient with our mapping and our surveys and outreach. So I'm excited to see what that opportunity brings and working with partners to hear what their needs are and how we might do that. Thinking more or less sort of operationally of what the future brings, thinking too about the work. I think there's going to be in the coming years a lot of opportunity to work to integrate coastal species needs and habitats with the work that is being done within communities to address things like increased storms and flooding and sea level rise. So as towns and individuals and private landowners think what they need to do and take action, there's going to be tremendous opportunity to integrate some of these species considerations. Because we are hearing from a lot of towns and individuals that they do care about the natural environment and what ways can they protect their shoreline, for example, that also help support species. So looking forward to that. Seabird and shorebird conservation and marine debris, I think, presents an opportunity for us to support partners, as does coastal habitat monitoring and assessment. I want to continue with the land conservation support that really has been such a great outcome here in Maine over the years, and I'd like for the service to continue that. And continued outreach and communications, talking with folks like yourselves, students, young children who might be interested in what they can do and how they can help. So I think it's important as a federal agency that we're talking about our work and reaching out to the various parts of the public. And finally, just some closing thoughts. I think by now, partnerships are key. This work can't be done alone. And we have an incredible program here with the Gulf of Maine Coastal Program with incredible partners. And that's one of the things that I love the most about this job. Again, I think in the future, we're going to need to be focused, but continue to be flexible and adaptable. And I'm curious, what thoughts you all have on opportunities that are out there because there are some complex issues and that creates opportunities. So always open to feedback and new partnerships. And I would just say, also in closing, things that you might want to consider to help out, always volunteering, engaging in citizen community projects and science, engaging with your decision makers and neighbors, and of course, reaching out to the Fish and Wildlife Service if you have any questions or needs. So, Ed and company, with that, that's my presentation. I want to thank you again for just having me here and being able to talk about the Fish and Wildlife Service and the Gulf of Maine Coastal Program.
No, thank you, Chris. That was great. Um, um, it's been a real pleasure working with your office over the years. You and I haven't worked together much, but your predecessor certainly for many years. Um, we have one question in the chat, but which is, does your team view dam removal as a priority? But I'd like to just ask first that you tell folks how you came to leave NOAA and come over to Fish and Wildlife Service and why, and then what is your office's relationship with NOAA here in the state on a sort of daily basis, or what issues are you guys getting together on, or what are
Yeah.
yeah, go
Um, I have tremendous amount of love for NOAA. Um, so right out of grad school, I ended up in Washington, D.C. on that fellowship. So I kind of cut my teeth with NOAA. I had with the NOAA National Marine Fisheries Service, tremendous experiences, whether it was working on recreational fisheries and getting to travel to different places and meeting with fishermen. One of the first ones to fly over the Deepwater Horizon oil spill when that happened. So a lot of my training and knowledge came from my time there, and I had some great mentors. But really, it was a time in my career where I had a choice to kind of keep going, perhaps pursue higher, newer positions of more authority and or move back to the Northeast and raise a family. And um, we chose to move to Maine when this opportunity came. I wanted to have a new challenge, and I really wanted to work closely with people on the ground who were right there, the front lines of the conservation issues and challenges. And knowing that this was a voluntary habitat restoration program, I just thought it would be just a great next career step. So lots of love to NOAA, but I also love the Fish and Wildlife Service and the work that we're doing here. Our relationship with NOAA is strong. I've been able to build on those relationships. We strategize on areas where to work, where to focus our dollars. We are a smaller program, but we kind of have more of the technical on the ground presence, and we tee up those projects that usually then NOAA will support and provide some funding for through their habitat restoration grants or maybe some of their fish passage grants. So a lot of times we're strategizing on where to work, how to work. That's with the National Marine Fisheries Service. We also work with the NOAA National Ocean Service. So those folks are more the coastal zone management folks who are thinking about coastal resilience. So we talk about priorities there as it relates to salt marsh work. So while they may be more focused on flood protection, we might be more focused on the fish and wildlife species, but together we can leverage our expertise. And we're doing that in almost all those projects that I listed, Scarborough Marsh, Addison. So it really is a good relationship. The two agencies are different, but we complement each other and really just maximize our impact.
Well, putting Vance's question about dam removal from first to second for a second, Sandy was asking whether your team works with or is involved much with near shore whale conservation, you know, or is that is that strictly a NOAA?
That is strictly, That's NOAA handles most of that work under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. It's not something that the Fish and Wildlife Service or my program does. Although I will say, and I'm curious, Sandy, if this is what was the driver for your question. I was recently contacted. I guess maybe there's a stranding or a carcass, maybe perhaps on the Cape, and the EPA contacted my office and asked, "Hey, is there anybody at the Fish and Wildlife Service within the refuge program down in Massachusetts that you can connect me with? We need some help with this whale." So, we might help out, but it isn't a focus for my program and not any others that I know of.
I think that sometimes it can be confusing as to which agency covers which species. And then, I mean, basically you guys are more inland, but you have fish as well, some fish, you know? So,
Yeah.
and I
Yep.
don't know, alligators, crocodiles, were those you guys versus no,
Yeah,
right?
that's us down south.
So, Vance asked, it- where is dam removal, for your team in terms of priority?
Yeah. Thank you for that question, Vance. So being a habitat watershed program, we're thinking about things on a watershed scale and then work down to individual rivers and streams. So ultimately, we're looking to improve aquatic connectivity, improve those processes that maybe have been cut off by dams. So we work with partners and municipalities and we do the research. We collect the data, the water level data, species data, and we provide it to partners. We work with our fish passage engineers in our regional office in Hadley, Massachusetts. And a lot of times we'll talk about like, hey, given where the community is and where, the species are, it might make sense to do a fish ladder. Or this dam is old, it's going to cost millions to repair. Removal might be the best course of action if that's where the community wants to go. So, if there's a willing community and we've got partners, we'll help in whatever way we can with a dam removal. So, that's kind of the case with the Royal right now. It seems as though the community is moving in that direction, and we're out there providing data and providing it to partners. But our program again is voluntary. We're not driving. We don't dictate. We really are there to sort of listen and provide what resources we can. But
Yeah.
aquatic connectivity is a priority for the region, for our programs, and part of that can be dam removal.
And I should clarify that it's your office that is taking a little bit, this sort of approach, but Fish and Wildlife Service definitely does weigh in a more aggressive way on that issue. And for
Yes.
instance, Fish and
Yeah.
Wildlife,
So
you've testified, you submitted comments to the Brunswick relicensing, for example. It's not your
yes,
office, but
no doubt. Not my office. That is yes, thank you. We do what we did. Right now we're down to hydropower biologists,
mm,
and they would work on relicensings at hydropower dams. So yes, we do have sort of like the more regulatory arm that is engaged in that relicensing process, which is ultimately run by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission.
is the hiring for those positions, is that open now still or is that on hold?
Not at the time, government-wide, we're under a hiring freeze.
Mhm.
So we're waiting to see when we will be given the green light to backfill.
Mhm.
But we are having conversations about, what can we do in the interim.
Did you have applicants for those positions before? Because well, Fred Seavey was one of those, right? And he's been gone for a while.
Uh,
So you had applicants before the freeze happened, or
so we
people
didn't even
on
get
the
to
queue? you
We
know?
didn't get to that point in the hiring process.
Yeah.
And Fred was a partners biologist, so he was kind of doing similar work to what our coastal program does. But it is an important position here in the Northeast for sure.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything else in the chat. I don't know, Martin, if you want to um, allow people to just speak, that there's not many of us here. So that would probably work okay if people would like to ask any questions, if you can open that up, Martin. Um, and Martin, you're muted right now.
If anyone wants to speak, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Um, and then just start talking.
Okay. Going, gone, right? Anyone, Vance, have anything else, or Sandy? Okay. Well, that's oh, all right. Vance is good. So, um, yeah.
Right.
All right. Well, I get let's call it then.
All right.
Thank you
Well,
very much. Thanks again, Chris. That's great. And look forward to continuing to work with you in your office. Sorry that you're moving further away from us. But hopefully you guys will stay involved up here as well. And you and I need to have that conversation about, maybe a little mid-coast, um, outpost or something, if you need, at least for storage or something,
all right. Well, thank you. I appreciate it, and I appreciate everybody joining.
So great. All right. Well, thank you. And again, this should be up on the website within a couple of days or so. I'll send you a link when it's there. Thank you again, Martin, and thanks everyone for coming. Bye-bye.